Hello everyone, this is a new video. In response to the previous video I made, I wanted to also highlight some other clips, some other argumentation that I have not addressed in my previous video. I will lay bare some of the arguments she's made in the first video and in the second video, and I will debunk them not as thoroughly as in the first video, because I think I made my points clear in that one. This will be more of the simple small pieces of evidence with the small wrong argumentation and point that out when I see it. So, enjoy. I will now show a few short clips which illustrate the point I was trying to make, that this essentialist view will lead to bad opinions on basically every other point they made in this video. I will illustrate by these next examples.
What do you view reparations as, more importantly?
So this is a big divide. Some people think like cash payments. I'm not a big fan of that. It doesn't fix the problem, for one. I'm a big fan of structural reparations, not based on race, but rather based on targeting neighborhoods that need it the most. Some of these neighborhoods are like white.
This clip is only been used to frame Vosh in a bad light. There has been no arguments made for reparation, but it does show to me that they don't need the arguments. They just need to appeal as if Vosh is talking about racism or having a racist view that encapsulates everything what I've discussed previously in this video.
My perspective on online leftist spaces was shattered when I saw this TikTok.
Look at what Vosh said today.
Is not make the shooting of that 16-year-old girl the hinge of our next big civil rights anti-cop push. Please, God, all you have to do is wait 24 hours and there will be a way worse police shooting.
I don't like that a lot of young leftists get introduced to leftist ideas through way of these debate bros. A lot of them claim to be these ultra progressives, but it's like they have no idea of what's going on in the actual world. So that's the reason why they have shit takes like this, or they get ultra defensive when people from the community call them out. Like, bro, we get it. You can debunk the 1350 statistics all day long, but ask one of these motherfuckers to humanize me. I am tired of seeing my oppression being used as talking points to fuel your ego when you debate fascists. This stuff isn't a debate. It's people's lives.
It was so mask off when he cavalierly suggested his audience to wait another 24 hours for a better victim to rally behind.
In this TikTok, I have searched for the original VOD in which Voss was talking about this incident. The argument being made here is that there was a shooting of a police officer of a 16-year-old. In this specific instance, the 16-year-old was about to stab or at least make a swinging motion with a knife to someone else. The police interacting with this young woman and shooting her to prevent a potential killing could be justified. It is not valuable to rally behind a potential justified shooting. It will be way easier to wait until the police does something so bad, so horrible, that we can actually rally behind it as one. There doesn't need to be a divide because it's very clear of the situation. We can see this with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, where everybody with, I would say, a little bit of an understanding of how these interactions should go, can see that this is not the way to go. However, again, in this specific case, it has been clear that the police acted to defend a helpless woman pressed against a car with a knife swinging at her. I will link the VOD in the description.
I didn't expect the simple point of listen to the colonized about their own oppression to generate such a mass boiling of piss on the online left, and yet here is the piss, and see how it's boiled.
I'll respond to each of these clips accordingly. Professor Flowers defended black separatists, aka someone who advocates for an ethno-state, and those are never a good thing, and yes, you must commit genocide to make one. I would be way less good faith if I was Vosh. This is true. She defended someone of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam is notorious for have worked with the Nazi Party in the US. Ethno-states but woke. This is also true if you advocate for the separation of colonizers and colonized people, and you have essentialized white people to be colonizers. This is an ethno-state. As the based Peter Coffin pointed out, land back is literally funded by Jeff Bezos and Amazon. It's just woke land expropriation. I do not agree with Peter Coffin. There are valid positions to hold on land back. I know simply about this case because I do not per se agree with Peter Coffin. There are valid ways to do land back without it ending up in ethno-state or genocide. Land back and ethno-nationalism are pretty much the same. They just want their own woke ethno-state. I'm sorry, but if your solution to colonialism is genocide and mass displacement, then maybe anti-imperialism and land back are greater evils. Perhaps social democracy is the best. This tweet has a lack of knowledge on land back issues, and by equating them, they show that they do not know enough about both issues. This is what Vosh has been trying to work against by bringing on an indigenous people.
But long story short, I made a couple videos on how Vosh's audience, rhetoric, and behavior makes leftist spaces hostile to other black leftists who simply disagree with him. And I recently ended up debating with him. But let's go over a short summary. Vosh and I start off talking about my video, where I say it's an issue that black people who disagree with Vosh are often compared to Nazis, and how that makes a hostile place for any black person that has the misfortune of disagreeing with him. I start by talking about how black people simply wanting their own spaces away from white people is not the same as segregationists. Vosh stands by his claim that they might as well be, and then we start talking about separatists along with colonialism. For about an hour, Vosh asks me if I think genocide is okay in the name of anti-colonialism, and compares the removal of colonizers to the Holocaust. He also makes the claim that I'm essentializing the white race with colonizers.
Vosh does not simply disagree with black people because they're black. Vosh targets anyone he disagrees with. To make it a racist point shows that, to me, you are not concerned about the actual arguments, you are concerned about how you do not have a place to say something that is invalid. It has nothing to do with race, it has everything to do with you disagreeing with Vosh.
SDL's deleted tweet wasn't too far from him being exposed for his past racist Discord chats.
The much worse statements are ones like this. So in this one, I say, blacks have big lips because they need more surface area when they suck a homie's big black cock. This is evolutionary science. Please to smash like and subscribe. This statement, I think, is totally unacceptable. And were I participating in one of my communities today, I would probably have banned or. Similarly, I would often use the phrase blacks instead.
This makes you wonder how much growth and change has he truly made.
I personally do not really care about socialism done left his racism. I do think it's horrible. I do not think, however, that this is an argument that invalidates his position. I do think it shows good signs that he is willing to apologize, that he's willing to say that he condemns this, and that he currently is actively fighting this sort of statements in his community. By now it has been 3 years ago since he posted such comments. I think that that is justified to now call him not racist anymore.
But the way Vosh constantly talks about being a sociology major, or how other people would get thrown out of sociology departments for their ideas.
Your sociological analysis would get you laughed out of any undergraduate degree, and I can say that with the absolute confidence of a person who didn't get laughed out of my classes.
Vosh acts like he went to an Ivy League or top HBCU with the way he talks.
Vosh has done sociology as a major. He clearly is very knowledgeable on these subjects. The hyperbolic statement that Professor Flowers would get laughed at out of sociology classes is basically just a hyperbolic statement meant to demean her. It is not really a debate tactic. It is more of he is at a point that he can properly denounce or talk down to the positions Professor Flowers has.
There are also people who've been on the alt-right who have moved to the left and haven't really addressed some of the things that they've said, or if they have, they're like, hey, I said sorry about that. And it's like, if you can't really like own that you've done these actions and that it still is hurtful to people, then it doesn't feel that sincere.
What else should happen if someone has been a Nazi and they have apologized for their opinions? What is the next step in which you would allow them to be a part of the left?
The problem with focusing on that is that you're creating a space where people who were, very recently Nazis are going to be hanging out with black people or transphobic people or people who are like, I'm not a Nazi anymore, but I still think that maybe racism isn't as big of a deal, or that trans women aren't women, or there's all these issues where it's like, I'm glad that you're not a Nazi. People who have a lot of power are focusing their energy on trying to convert the least helpful people, or when they finally do get over here, a lot of them still have a lot of stuff to deal with. And so you have this issue where a lot of white leftists can engage with incels more than they can with actual black leftists who are organizing.
I have 2 quick points on this. First of all, it is the job of the people who are in these online spaces to convince as many people as possible of our ideas. If you have a Nazi who is convinced by an argument Voss makes or Zenderhal makes, that's a good thing. Even though it may be a small step, and even they do not know the extent to which racism is still a thing in the US, letting them into these leftist spaces, letting them learn from other leftists who have already been in that position, will allow them to be better advocates for leftist policies. They will be moved left if they get into these spaces. They will move left if they hear these arguments. Second, you do not need to appeal to the people who are already of the same position as you are. That's not the goal. The goal is to convince these people, is to convince people of your position. And if you already have people on your stream or in your debates who already agree with you, then there's not really much convincing to do.
People are going to be leftist. We have the platform to reach these people. We have the platform to have white leftists and black leftists be working together. We have the ability to reach these people facing evictions, to reach all the people who are facing unemployment, who don't have enough money. We are the populist movement, and yet we're not reaching these people, and that's where so much of the frustration comes.
At last, we do not have the movement right now to do this. There are still a lot of far-right people, there are still a lot of right-leaning people. They're making a comeback. It is not 2016 where people are constantly shitting on left content creators. However, we are getting into an era where this may happen again, where the people on the left, where feminists, where black people, where land back activists can potentially be harassed again by right-leaning content. The issue is that we now have a lot of platforms, that we now do have some sort of influence. However, it may change again. And if we exclude people who are ex-Nazis, if we exclude people who are maybe liberals, who need to be convinced of socialism, then our movement will crumble again. And that's something we need to prevent.
I completely agree with PF's take that white leftists found a way to demonize. I also want to add that a segment of online leftists, mostly Twitch, focus and engage more with ex-alt-righters like Hunter Avalon more than black leftists. A lot of reformed white leftists lack a lot of contrition for the racism they participated in. We are told we're scolding when we state our discomfort with them, down to their senseless excuses we get for their past usage of the N-word. Too many white leftists debate right-wingers on 1350, but struggle to engage with black leftists, thought leaders, and activists. They also use woke scold and impul to skirt away from engaging with the fact that we're giving them valid criticisms. We're definitely not going to have leftist unity if they're using out-of-touch words to continuously silence BIPOC. Now let's see a couple clips from Professor Flower's reaction to a debate bro reacting to her hot take.
How to do a Black Lives Matter protest. Let's find out what he's gonna say. Let's find out what valuable information this person's gonna say.
You're completely fine to not want to associate privately when it comes to friendships with people. When it comes to getting together to achieve real political change, don't do this shit. Don't do the whole, you had bad opinions 4 years ago, and even though you're better now, we can't work together because you used to be bad, right?
You don't get to decide that for anyone, but especially you as a white person, you don't get to decide that for Black people. The fact that I'm making this video, do you know what a joke this is? Like, do you know how silly it is that I have to sit here in a leftist space and talk about how that is just silly?
And even though you're better now, we can't work together because you used to be bad, right? Don't do this kind of shit, all right? It is embarrassing.
I should be embarrassed. I should be embarrassed. I think as someone used to be a Nazi, and that comes along with like being transphobic, and it obviously comes along with being racist. There's gonna be people who are like, hey, like, I'm Black, and I don't feel comfortable working with you. And that's fair. There are people who
I don't think that's fair. I'm gonna be completely honest.
No! You don't get to decide for Black people their boundaries.
That is pathetic. On top of that, and I will die on this hill, okay? I think that a leftist who used to be a reactionary, who realized it was wrong, and is now progressive, is a more effective leftist than someone who's been a leftist their whole lives. I will die on that hill. And you know why? It's because people who used to be alt-righters, people who used to be Nazis, they heard all the arguments, all the beliefs that Nazis and alt-righters have, and that conservatives have. And in the end, they still realized it was all wrong.
The argument Xander Hall is making is what I just made. We should not exclude people from our movement if we want to become stronger and larger. Even though they're ex-Nazis, even though they still have some bad opinions, if they are able to rally behind a common goal, then that's something we should pursue. You do not even give a reason why you disagree with this. You just call it silly and move on. Please, Professor Flowers, if you're seeing this, this is not an argument.
This is a mask-off example of white leftists that lack contrition to uphold their white entitlement that they use to speak over BIPOC. This is alarming to see as an activist that organizes protests. BIPOC organizers have to prioritize being intersectional over hosting an ex-problematic figure. We cater to the most marginalized to ensure silent voices are finally heard. White leftists have to look deep into themselves and address their covert and sometimes overt racism. We're not going to grow as a unit if this isn't addressed. A real-time example is white feminists that are demanding BIPOC femmes and queer folks to unite. The core issue is how white feminists sat by and allowed BIPOC human rights to be taken away. They weren't outraged when Latina folks' uteruses were taken away at the border. They weren't vocal on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and queer folks. They took the health care that has a legacy on experimenting on Black and Indigenous people for granted. Vaginal care that has deep ties to enslaved Black women being exploited for your vaginal health. And don't even get me started on the Handmaid's Tale cosplay. This conversation is just touching the tip of the iceberg.
If you're an organizer and you are trying to rally, or you're trying to get a guest speaker on some of these events, I'm completely fine with having intersectional people. However, I think if you have an event and you are not allowing Nazis or at least ex-Nazis not to be let in because they were Nazis or because they were liberal or because they were racist in the past, I think that's something you should argue against. I don't really care who is speaking at those events. I care about who is allowed to get to these events, who is allowed to get into these communities. Because if you're not willing to let people who used to have bad opinions, let them hear your more extreme opinions, then you will never be able to convince them because they'll never hear the arguments. And that's something we should encourage. More interaction with people who used to be on the right. Thank you everybody for watching this video. I hope to do more content like this. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.